Welcome to the Flight Club Podcast, a woman's guide to leaning out. We give you a behind-the-scenes look at business launch and growth through the stories of successful female entrepreneurs. Here's your host, Felina Hansen, founder and CEO of Hera Hub.
Hello and welcome. I am excited for my conversation today with Allison Pierre, who is a true innovator. She founded back in 2019 Innovative Prosecution Consulting, a criminal justice consulting firm. And her firm works in partnership with American University's School of Justice, Law, and Criminology. Welcome to the show today, Allison.
Hello, I'm glad to join you today.
Yeah, I'm excited to share your story. You have an incredible background. We could take 12 hours to tell your story. I mean, you really have such an incredible career. I know you're originally East Coast girl, born there in Washington, D.C. Talk to us about some of the early decisions that you made as far as education. I see an economics degree here. So talk to us about how you made that decision, and then we'll talk about your career path and then going back to law school and all of that good stuff.
Absolutely. I decided early on that I knew I wanted to go to graduate school, but I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. And in terms of my educational path, I knew I wanted to be in a really wonderful research university. So I ended up at Columbia University in New York City and fell in love with it. And then at that point, I knew since I had thought about graduate school, I thought about actually getting an MBA. And it wasn't until later that I pivoted to knowing that I wanted to be an attorney.
Awesome. Well, I'm a closet economist, so I love to love to see that. So talk about some of those early choices you made after you graduated there in New York.
When I graduated from college, I was really interested in actually going into business, something dealing with management consulting. But then when I was actually at a internship that I had in college, I saw an attorney perform in court, do a cross-examination. And it was the most thrilling thing for me because it was theatrical and dramatic. And I realized in college that I wanted to go to law school. So right after I graduated from Barnard College at Columbia University, I became a urban fellow. I did a fellowship program and then became a paralegal at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. And that's where I fell in love with the idea of being a prosecutor.
Amazing. And what a job. I mean, that is absolutely an amazing and unique skill set. So talk to us then about, I see that, you have various positions working for the U.S. Department of Justice, the United States Attorney's Office. Talk to us about some of those early career choices and some of the work that you did.
I knew that in law school, once I decided I wanted to go to law school and be a prosecutor, that I want to focus on criminal law and criminal justice. So my dream job was actually being able to be a prosecutor. And I got the job at the Brooklyn DA's office, and it was fantastic. I was there for about 5 years and then moved on to the U.S. Attorney's Office a little bit later. And in between that time, between the Brooklyn DA's office and U.S. Attorney's Office, I did explore private practice and commercial litigation, but I really knew that my passion about what I wanted to do was related to criminal justice. And what I did is I decided to continue on with my passion, and I moved from New York to DC and decided to do a fellowship at the U.S. Attorney's Office and fell in love again with my first love, which is criminal law. And then I had a different point of view that I'll share with you, which was to think about what I wanted to do as to impact for my career.
And talk about a bit about what you've seen and changes in the criminal justice system, some of the impacts that you've made, obviously through your career. And I'm going to ask the wave the wand question. We don't have to get to it now. We can talk about it later if you like. But what needs to change in the criminal justice system from your point of view?
I really know in my heart and my soul that what needs to change is we need to have a deep shift in how we handle cases so that everyone has a fair outcome, no matter your racial background, your ethnic background, or how much money you have. And the reason I got to that conclusion was after I read a book called The New Jim Crow: Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness. And it may sound a little unusual to read a book and then want to change your career, but that's what happened to me. I read this book. It was an awakening because the book showed me that there was a lot of deep unfairness in our criminal justice system. And after I read that book and also watched a documentary called 13th, which is about our prison system, and it's something that Ava DuVernay put together. She's a well-known filmmaker. The book and the film made me decide that I wanted to make impact and do something now about the unfairness I was seeing. And the reason I decided to change my career was because I saw that I had the unique skill set to address unfairness in the criminal justice system from my perspective of being a practitioner, number one, and number two, being personally connected to the community that has arguably suffered the most from unfairness, which is the African American community. And for me, this was such a personal decision. I really wanted to make piercing impact immediately. So I created my own business.
Talk about some of the experience, or maybe one of the experiences you had, Allison, that really, just obviously you saw this, but share one of those experiences with our audience of what you saw and how that affected you.
When I was a prosecutor at the Brooklyn DA's office and at the U.S. Attorney's office, I definitely saw that a lot of the people who were in court who are defendants, or those are the people who are been arrested and have been accused of a crime, a lot of them were African American or Latinx. And I started to really question if there was an over-policing or over-prosecution of communities of color. And then when I researched and read about it after I left the U.S. Attorney's office, it became clear that the answer to that was yes, in some respects. So my experiences of practicing was the first awakening within me, seeing visually that there was an overrepresentation of people of color in the criminal justice system. And then the second part of after I had this awakening was to really think about what I could do. Because for me, this is a calling. I feel like this is what I'm meant to do, not be a prosecutor for the next 20 years, but actually help prosecutors make transformational change in their offices.
And is that the work you were doing in private practice? And is that the work you're doing now as well?
Actually, it's very different than the work I did when I was a prosecutor and even in private practice, because this is policy reform. Mm-hmm. The work I'm doing now is looking at how prosecutors handle their cases and trying to determine if they can be handled differently and to ensure fairness. Mm. And the crux of what I do now is work with the office's internal data, help them analyze it to see if there's disparities in how prosecutors are handling their cases. For an example would be if the prosecutor has 100 cases and they're making a sentence recommendation, you want to make sure that each sentence recommendation for those 100 cases are fair. Mm-hmm. And the only way to do that is to analyze the cases and see if there's trends. Maybe they're There's trends that are showing that there's overly harsh sentence recommendations when they should be different.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe the sentence should be community service instead of something that's harsher, like a jail time. So those are the kinds of things that we're trying to help prosecutors do and use their internal data, but also help them with creating data dashboards.
Mm-hmm. And I want to dive into this a little further, Allison, because you created this program with 3 parts: the data research, building dashboards, policy reform, community engagement, tapping into your economics degree, perhaps, and looking at data and creating a dashboard for folks to look at. Why hadn't that been done before or done effectively?
I asked myself the same question, and the answer is criminal justice practitioners, whether it's judges or police officers or prosecutors, defense counsel, they tend to be a little bit behind as to technology, data analysis than other industries. And the reason is because there really hasn't been pressure on them to reveal those kinds of statistics and data until recently. In 2020, there was a huge awakening in our country where the public wanted more transparency. They wanted to understand what prosecutors do. They had an understanding of what judges and police officers do, but they didn't understand what prosecutors do. And that was the first time that there was a lot of much more emphasis on learning through data and technology what the prosecutor offices, what they do, and then how they're making their decisions. Because the prosecutor is the most powerful person in the courtroom. They determine who walks through the courtroom doors because they determine whether to charge an individual or not charge them. And a police officer and a judge don't make those kinds of decisions.
So interesting. And the sharing of that information, is that something that's being done, or is that something that's just, and okay, great.
It's something that's new, actually. In 2016, there was a movement of reform prosecutors being elected around the country. Part of the agenda of reform prosecution is to share with the community data and statistics about the decision-making that happens, charging, plea offers, bail, sentence recommendations. And it started in 2016, and then it became more of an urgency in 2020 with the Black Lives Matter movement, racial justice protests. Then there was even more hunger that the public had for wanting to understand that if someone from their community is going to be arrested, are they going to be given a fair outcome with their prosecutor, with police, and with judges. And that's when the public had much more of an interest and a hunger in prosecutors being transparent. And that's when reform prosecutors started to provide more data to their constituents and their communities, in data meaning dashboards, which is where we come in.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. So I want to dive into this more. So you're executive director, program management, innovative prosecution consulting. You've had your firm now for about 2.5 years there in Washington, D.C. I hope it's okay to ask these questions, Allison, because I'm just, I've done a bit of reading and I'm just so curious. The sentencing obviously is a significant part of this, but the charging and the bail and the plea offer all, are all part of this process. I've read a bit about the bail process in particular, and, the inequalities and just the system. Can you talk a bit about, the work you've done or your knowledge around how that particular piece of the puzzle plays into this?
Absolutely. Bail reform is probably at the priority of a lot of criminal justice advocate work. And bail or bond is important because it determines whether a person is released or held. And that's important because let's say if I get arrested, the judge will make a determination whether to hold me or release me until the next court date. If the judge holds me in court, then they're incarcerating me without having my case being resolved. And sometimes that's warranted if I create, if there's a likelihood that I could cause harm to the community, that's when you're held. But if there is no likelihood that I'm going to provide any kind of harm to the community, then I should be considered for release. Mm-hmm. And that's the major concept. What's happened historically is people who have money have been able to post bail. So let's say I get arrested and I have my bail is set at $5,000 and I have the $5,000, I can pay that and then get out and go and come back for the next court date. But if I don't have the money, then I have to stay in jail until the next court date. So that means that because I had money, I was able to be released, which means that if you are poor, then you're being held. And the issue with bail is it's really important to understand because you don't want people held for an unfair reason. Mm-hmm. In the work that we're doing in Virginia at the Fairfax County Commonwealth Attorney's Office, we're looking at their bond data, and we've assisted in the development of their bond dashboard. And the Fairfax County Commonwealth Attorney's Office is the largest prosecutor's office in Virginia.
And how is this data, this information being shared with the broader community?
It's being shared on the dashboard, which is now live with the office. So the community can see when the prosecutor asks for a hold or for a defendant to be held, or when the prosecutor asks for a defendant to be released. And it's important so the community can see the decision-making that's happening in the office with the prosecutor's recommendation to hold or release a defendant. And also it shows what the judge decided to do. Ultimately, the judge, after hearing the recommendation of the prosecutor, will make a decision whether to hold or release the defendant. And now it's made public. But the bigger picture is to explain to the community about what a prosecutor does, and that there's other major decisions prosecutors make, such as charging and plea offers and bail recommendations and sentencing. The overall goal is to teach everyone in the community about the role of the prosecutor and what kind of reforms are trying to be executed. And a quick example is there's something called alternatives to incarceration. When it's feasible, it's important for individuals to be able to go to mental health treatment or drug treatment or community service or something to that effect. And that's something that is really important for the community to know that is an option. And that's what we want for our dashboard, to tell a narrative about what reform looks like in their community, and also show what the prosecutor's decision-making, what that is.
Yeah. And talk about the software, Tableau, the platform that you're using. And I understand that you wrote a grant, through their foundation. Just educate us on what that software is and how it works. And side note disclaimer, I took a Tableau class pre-pandemic just for fun to try to understand the platform a little bit myself. It seems like such an amazing tool and can be used, so versatilely and for so many different things.
It can. My vision for prosecutors' offices is for them to be able to show the community what they're doing with an external dashboard that everyone can see. And it would be an ongoing dashboard where you'd have ongoing, meaning you'd have ongoing content, like it could have a blog, it could have Instagram reels on it. And the purpose of Tableau is to take numbers and put it into a story that everyone can understand about what the message is. And our message is reform. And then the other part of the software is that we want it to be used to make decision-making more efficient. So for instance, an attorney can be in her office and have her dashboard on her desktop. She can go to court and have her dashboard on her iPhone, or she can, be in transit and have it on her laptop and know the big scheme, big picture of her entire caseload and see how many cases she has on for sentencing or for bond hearings. And the purpose is to have the lawyers be able to use technology to do their jobs more efficiently internally, but also the other purpose is to use the software to have a public dashboard to tell the story of the kinds of reforms that the office is implementing, whether it's developing a veterans court or a mental health treatment court. We want the dashboard to be an ongoing communication tool that constituents can understand and get to really understand and embrace and contribute to.
Amazing. And what's next? You applied for this grant. Have you received the grant yet from the Tableau Foundation?
Well, actually, we were hired by a contract with Fairfax County Commonwealth Attorney's Office. So that was a huge win for us. We have a multi-year contract with them. And in terms of what's next, we are looking to expand to a second and maybe third office in the Maryland or Virginia area, but we're also open to expanding in a different jurisdiction around the country. And as to Tableau Foundation, what I did there is I went to that foundation to talk to them about prosecutors reform, and I steered Tableau Foundation as well as a couple of other entities to Fairfax Commonwealth Attorney's Office. I really was the catalyst that steered these entities to this office. And what's happened is Tableau Foundation, through a grant, has given licenses for the software to the office by way of an entity called Measures for Justice. So my role was to be the catalyst and the connector to highlight and champion this Virginia prosecutor's office as the site location for a grant, where the grant would be getting licenses for software to right to the office.
And how does this look as far as, opportunities to roll this out across the country?
Fantastic. We are definitely interested in rolling this out to multiple prosecutors' offices around the country. We're looking to partner with offices who want to increase their data capacity, if they want to create a data dashboard. Those are our expertise, and we also are very good at customizing our work plan to meet the office's needs. That's our specialty. We can create a tailored work plan that addresses whatever the needs are of the prosecutor's office. Our expansion is planned out for the next 3 years, and we would like to expand to a second and perhaps third office next year.
And I would imagine, Allison, the power really starts to, kick in as you're able to network this data together across multiple cities, multiple states, and across the country.
That is the goal. Everything that we learn from our pilot office at the Fairfax office would be applied to other offices around the country. And it would be putting together a network of offices, for instance, having a data director who is in a prosecutor's office in Seattle would be able to talk to another data director from the prosecutor's office in Fairfax. That's an example of how we want to take everything we learn and apply it to our next office, but also create a kind of a collaborative space where everyone in these reform prosecutors' offices can learn from each other about how to create a data program.
Absolutely. You are doing some incredible work, Allison. It's so fun to learn about the work you're doing. So interesting. If folks want to get in touch with you, they want to learn more about your work, where is the best place for them to go?
Our website is www.reformagents.com, and you can always reach me directly. My email address is very simple. It's acp@pierrelegal.com, acp@pierrelegal.com. But our website, www.reformagents.com, and then you can also email me. And that's the best way.
Awesome. I love it. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you sharing your story with us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining this week's episode of Flight Club, sponsored by Hera Hub. We look forward to sharing more success stories with you soon.